Emotionally detached or emotionally unavailable? We're going to talk about this today. Well, hey everyone, Mireille, Nicole here. I am so excited. You guys are loving my videos on the topics of emotional detachment and non-reactivity. This is like an area of self-development that I am obsessed with because I am like a super sensitive person. I am full of emotions. And for a long time, I was letting those emotions and those feelings run the show. And it was causing a lot of problems in my love life, specifically the relationship I'm in now with my husband. But even though you guys are loving these videos, I still get nasty comments every now and then about how the way I explain emotional detachment might seem cold or heartless. So I really want to clarify here the difference between what I consider to potentially be cold and heartless, which is unavailability, being emotionally unavailable, whereas being emotionally detached, in my opinion, is the healthy way to protect your own energy and to make it a safe space in your relationship to actually have emotions, to share feelings, and to have a deeper connection on that emotional feelings level. So I'm going to give you guys my two definitions, or like a definition each for detachment and unavailable, in my opinion, obviously, and also a personal story, because yesterday I was actually talking to my husband about this, and we were talking about how well these videos were doing, and he mentioned how I had displayed like the perfect example of emotional detachment in our own situation, like that day, that morning, and how he really appreciated the way I handled the situation. So I'm going to talk about it in that context to hopefully help you see and kind of illustrate what I mean by emotional detachment versus how I see emotional unavailability. To me, being emotionally detached still means that you can see and hear other people's feelings and emotions. You still hold space for them. You can still empathize with those feelings or emotions and that other person. You recognize it, but you don't carry it as your own. You don't take it on for yourself. And that's the big distinction here in terms of being emotionally detached and not having any concern or any thought towards other people's feelings at all. When you're emotionally detached, it simply means that you can see the emotions that are coming up in the situation as, think of it as like a separate entity, like another person, maybe even a third person in the room, if you need to picture it that way, right? That way you can still keep a little bit of distance between it and stay kind of in your rational, logical mind. Because if we're too like entangled and enmeshed in the feelings ourselves, then it's a lot harder for us to think clearly, really understand objectively where the other person is coming from, and even feel comfortable and safe sharing emotions and feelings. If it becomes a very distressing situation for us or position to be in, then it's going to be hard to have that emotional intimacy in the relationship, right? It's going to be scary to talk about feelings and those negative emotions that are just, you know what, they're a part of life. They're a part of our human experience, and they will come up. I like to think of emotional detachment also versus emotional unavailability in terms of your comfort level with the emotions and other people's feelings and even your own feelings. So being emotionally detached still means that you are comfortable with the feelings around you. It just means you don't let them carry you away or impact you negatively, or maybe even prevent you from responding appropriately in the situation and getting you and your partner or the other person out of this, maybe this mess. Being emotionally detached can be like a lifesaver in a situation. And honestly, having a certain amount of emotional detachment and comfort level with emotions, no matter what those emotions are, and being able to stay in your rational, intelligent, and objective mind is a way to bring more closeness in your relationship, have more intimacy. It's actually the way to growth. So don't be afraid to detach. Don't associate it with being an ice queen, being super cold, giving the silent treatment. That's going to be different. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But an example of how I use emotional detachment in all sorts of situations in life and in my love life was the example I just mentioned earlier that my husband called out, right? So it was early in the morning. You know, we had just gotten up. I was getting my son ready for school, and we had just gotten snow the day before, and we live in Canada. So it was one of our first snowfalls, a most significant snowfall to date. And I was asking my husband where he had put like the broom, is that what you call it in English too, or balai, just to like, you know, take the snow off the windshield. And I asked this, I realized sometimes I ask questions in an annoying way to my husband, or in a way I should say that irritate him. So I asked him in my usual way, and he gave me a certain certain response that was kind of a little bit snarky or sarcastic. And I could tell that he wasn't in the best mood at that point. Like, I think he didn't even have his coffee yet. And an example there of me emotionally detaching is I didn't let his bad mood influence my mood. I was in a good mood that morning. I was actually like rocking it. I was on fire. I was getting things done. I had all these things planned. Like, things were working out for me. And when he had like this little dark cloud over him, when I tried to engage and ask him a simple question, I did not let that affect me. And I don't mean in the sense that, I completely ignored it. Like, I kind of ignored it, but I ignored it like warmly, if that makes sense, right? Like, I didn't punish him for being in a bad mood. I didn't make him feel bad for being in a bad mood. I didn't kind of reciprocate what he did, like respond back or react in the same tone that he did. Like, I kind of like brushed it off, no pun intended, and just went on with my day, right? And later on, like, the mood was fine when I left the house to go bring my son to school, and we just did our days and had, a nice supper and everything, and it just kind of like glossed things over. But I know for myself, like thinking back maybe 2, 3, 4 years ago in our relationship, when I was only beginning to work on my emotional detachment, and at some point I didn't even realize like the whole importance and concept of emotional detachment the way I understand it now, like his bad mood would have totally influenced my mood. Like, I would have been totally grumpy after that myself, right? I totally would have taken that on. I would have taken it personally. I would have made it mean something about me. I would have made it mean something about our relationship. And in no way would that have been productive to us as a couple. And I love how my husband brought that up later that evening when we were talking about emotional detachment and showed his appreciation to me. So it just confirmed that the whole idea of emotional detachment doesn't have to be cold, doesn't have to be mean. It's not about punishing. It's not about avoiding things completely. It's about kind of working with it, giving space to your partner to have emotions, to having comfort with that, to making that safe space, creating that safe space for them. And you being in your power and staying strong, right? You don't have to take on other people's emotions. It's not your responsibility. You can still be caring, but imagine the day how that would have went if I would have totally participated in his bad mood on the basis of me wanting to show that, we're attuned in that, in that context. Attunement is fine. It's great in a relationship, but there is nuance there. And in cases like this, sometimes it's going to be a lot better to practice detachment than getting all tangled into that. Because, I can just picture how our day would have went, because back in the day when I was enmeshed in his emotions and not detached from his emotions, and I would just take them all on, we probably would have gotten into a big argument. We would have, gone through our workday grumpy at one another, and it would totally have ruined the mood. And instead of contributing to our growth and our intimacy and our closeness and happiness as a couple, it just would have served to make things more difficult for us. And who knows where our relationship would have ended up. So let's talk about being unavailable. So I pretty much see being emotionally unavailable as the opposite of what I've just described. So it's about not being able to hold space for your partner's emotions. It's about being very uncomfortable when these emotions come up. Maybe you ignore them completely. Maybe you avoid them. And maybe you don't even share your own emotions. And this is how being unavailable is going to prevent growth as a couple, is going to be, an obstacle to intimacy and to closeness. The emotionally unavailable person just doesn't want to hear anything about what's going on in your own internal world, or vice versa. And that's often going to happen if there is a lot of taking on the emotions of the other person. If you're not detaching, right? It could be being emotionally unavailable can oftentimes be just a defense mechanism, because we don't know how to lovingly and appropriately detach. We just cut ourselves off completely from it so we don't have to deal. So in the example with my husband, I didn't punish him for being in a bad mood. I didn't run away from his bad mood. I was able to hold space for it. If I was unavailable, maybe I would have taken different steps and actions to completely dismiss what he was feeling. But instead, I'm able to hold his intense emotions and make it safe for him to express those. Listen, a lot of women that come to me, one of the major challenges or complaints they have is they feel like their man is emotionally unavailable. So one of the great ways to be able to have or encourage your man to open up is to create that safety for him. And you're going to be a safe space when you are able to hold on to your own emotions, stay true to your own emotions in the moment when he is opening up and sharing, right? And big step towards doing that is going to be for you to detach from them so that he can open and he can share with you. So I want you to know that just because it might seem like your partner is emotionally unavailable, it doesn't mean that you're doomed in the relationship. One of the big things that could be at play here is a lack of emotional detachment from your part, and also, and I talk a lot about this too in other videos, effective communications. But side note, I'll talk more about that in other videos. But for now, just remember, being emotionally detached does not mean that you are heartless and cold and you don't care about the other person or don't want to hear about their emotions or their feelings. That's going to be closer to being emotionally unavailable. Being emotionally detached is just maintaining a healthy distance between you and the emotions, having a more healthy relationship too with those feelings from the other person, right? Understanding who owns them, how much do you take on, how much do you not take on of those emotions, so that you can encourage and foster that growth as a couple and create that closeness and intimacy that you ultimately desire from your relationship and with your partner. I hope this clarifies the difference between being emotionally detached, emotionally unavailable, and when you watch my other videos on emotional detachment and non-reactivity, it'll all make sense to you. Now, before I sign off for the day, I just want to ask you, how do you feel about emotional detachment versus emotional unavailability? Have you experienced this in your own relationship? Are you personally getting pretty good at emotionally detaching, or is this something that you really desire to work on some more? Let us know, share your experience with us. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I will get back to you. All right, thank you so much for watching, and I will see all of you in the next video.